Welcome to hour number 2 on a Friday on Hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. How much do you know about K-food? How much hanshik have you eaten?
We invite you into the world of Korean food, of course, including the history and culture of it. We'll introduce trendy foods and famous restaurants on
Dish of the Day
with Chef Ryan.
How you doing today?
I'm good, man. Pleasure to be here, as always.
Loving it, as always, as well. The new year, 2023, you getting used to that number?
Oh, not yet, no. But yeah, Year of the Rabbit sounds good, you know?
Rabbits are cute. There's no one that doesn't like rabbits, right?
Little toki tongue.
Do you... Toki tongue being like a rabbit stew or soup.
Rabbit stew.
Have you had that? Is that a Korean thing?
It really is.
Is it good?
It's wonderful.
Really?
It's absolutely wonderful.
I think I've never eaten rabbit in my whole life.
It's not super common. You can find it in the countryside more, but it's really good stuff. And it's a really healthy meat for us to consume. Yeah, it's lower in cholesterol, I suppose, and lots of protein and.
Okay, so maybe I should try, because in England, it's a thing as well.
Oh, in Greece, rabbits everywhere, and it's just it's probably a way better animal to consume for the environment as well.
Okay. Do you, running your farm, are they like a pest or anything like that?
No, there's not a lot of wild rabbits. Our farm is kind of urban, but yeah, I'm happy for the Year of the Rabbit. And I would love to have pet rabbits on the farm, not to eat, but actually to help create fertilizer.
Are their droppings good for the soil?
Oh, big time.
Really? I did not know that at all. Is rabbit relatively common in the US to eat as well?
No, you can find it, but it's not super common. I was lucky enough to find a farmer here in Korea, and she sent me a bunch of really delicious rabbit.
Wow.
And Hossenpfeffer.
A Hossenpfeffer?
Oh, you don't remember those cartoons?
No, what's a Hossenpfeffer?
Oh, come on, the old cartoons when they're talking about cooking up that famous rabbit and it's like making Hossenpfeffer.
Hossenpfeffer.
Hossenpfeffer. It's rabbit stew. Yeah.
Sounds very German. And I'm sure when I learnt German that I can't remember the names for any animals, but I'm pretty certain rabbit was Canadian, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know where that comes from. Very interesting stuff. We shouldn't be talking about eating rabbits in the Year of the Rabbit. They'll be very disturbed.
This is true.
Although, I'm now very curious because I like eating lots of different meat, at least one time. And it's not like gamey or anything like that. It's kind of chickeny.
Yeah, more like chicken. It's kind of like if a pig and a chicken had a baby.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's great.
I love a lot about pork, and chicken sometimes, especially the drier parts, is a bit underwhelming. So maybe the Year of the Rabbit is the year that I try rabbit for the first time. If Ryan knows any good toki tongue places, I might have to pick your brains for them. Happy New Year once again. We've been so chatty. Let's get to today's food dish before the end of part 1. Yeah. I've previewed it already, saying it's one of my favorite, especially in the wintertime.
That's why we chose this topic today. It's because, when I think about winter, what do you think about for your winter dish?
I got to say, a lot of Korean soups, right, because of my mum.
Sure.
But if I had to pick a British thing, it would probably be a good stew.
Yeah.
Maybe a beef or a lamb stew with a kind of gravy base, lots of vegetables. And it doesn't look great, it's all mushy.
A lot of times it's a big one-dish meal, right?
But it's so good.
It's so good. I think about Texas chili. I think about chicken and dumplings.
Is that a big thing?
In my family anyway, it is.
Is that with a kind of soupy base?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Some versions are thicker than others. But
what's Texas chili, by the way?
Well, chili.
As in like a sloppy Joe kind of the chili in there?
Well, yes, but no.
Okay.
Chili, we've got a chili competition every year here in Korea.
Wow.
And I've taken home the gold before.
Nice.
Not every time. There's a lot of good competition, but it's mostly beef.
Okay.
And then there's a big fight over whether or not it has beans in it. But it's a one-dish meal, and what we're talking about today really is a one-dish meal. And I can't think of another more heartwarming winter food to have. It'll just warm you up than Kimchijjim.
Kimchijjim. Okay.
Right.
I think our listeners, we must have talked about on the show, of course, kimchi and the hundreds of different types of kimchi,
there you go.
right?
Yeah.
But also then the different ways that you
thousands.
can use kimchi in different guises. Like we must have talked about kimchijjjigae before because that's maybe more common.
Yeah, and there are a lot of similarities between kimchijjjigae and kimchijjim.
Okay.
One of the main ones is just time of cooking and presentation. The ingredients are very, very similar.
Yeah. How would we describe the jim then in English?
Braised. It's
Braised.
definitely braised. It's
Okay.
often used as steam,
Okay.
but those are kind of interchangeable here. When you say chim, it could mean braised or it could mean steamed. It could also sometimes mean boiled, but it's a shallow boil.
Shallow boil. Because for a jim, when I was not thinking technically about it, I would just say maybe it's some kind of stew.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't know because some people translate all the jjigaes into stews, right?
I consider jjigae as more of a stew than a jim. A jim's a little bit less liquid traditionally. You're still going to have those juices. You got to have that kimchi kongo.
So that's why it's a braise.
Yeah.
Less juices.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes way more sense, I think.
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
If you are in Jeju,
88.7 in Jeju City.
88.1 in Seogwipo City.
101.9 in the Daejeong area.
Arirang Radio.
We're talking about a winter dish that really does warm the heart, the soul, the belly as well.
Oh, baby.
The throat when it goes down. And we mentioned some of your home comforts, Texas chili, chicken and dumplings. I've talked about stew in the UK as well. And in Korea, I'm trying to think, what are the winter ones? Because samgyetang is definitely associated with those summer dog days, right? That big chicken kind of soup hole.
Right.
Maybe kalguksu in the wintertime.
Definitely kalguksu.
It's quite a thick soup once the
there's
flour
so many
noodles.
variations of that. I love the ones that have a lot of the wild sesame or the perilla seed powder in there.
Really?
There's so many good ones.
Yeah, and that really hits the spot because once you start cooking that, the flour makes the soup really thick.
Thicken up.
And it stays really warm for ages. I need some. I haven't had good kalguksu for ages now.
I just was shown a wonderful spot that's in my hometown here.
Oh,
And it's a little hidden gem.
what kind of kalguksu is it? Like a pajidak with the little shellfish?
No.
I like that.
It has the dulke karu or the wild sesame powder. It has some really nice gochu karu. Everything that they add to it. It's definitely not some store-bought, mass-produced product. It's really got a touch to it, and yeah, when the flour that's on those noodles comes off, because see, when you make fresh pasta, you got to keep a lot of flour on them, or else they're going to stick together.
Sure.
And so as they're cooking, that layer of flour comes off first.
Yeah.
And it just starts to thicken up everything.
I guess with
great winter
pasta,
food.
that doesn't really happen because when you boil it, the flour just goes in that water, right? But with like kalguksu, that's the broth that you're eating.
Well, you'll find plenty of recipes where they'll say, put a few spoonfuls of that water. Like when you're making your ramen, put a few spoonfuls of that water.
Into your pasta.
Into your pasta, back
that's
in,
clever
and then
as well.
add in the cream or whatever else.
Okay, we could talk about kalguksu for a whole episode. I'm sure
There
we
you go.
will in the future. But Kimchijjim is the star of the show today. Although having said, it's a winter kind of thing, you crave it then. People eat this all year round, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's restaurants that specialize in this. Folks go for big lunches, office lunches. I went to a spot years ago up near Gwanghwamun, near the palace up there, that was just packed for lunch on a Tuesday. And it's a beautiful thing for large groups. If you want to make and then it's really easy too, guys. If you wanted to make this for a small dinner party, it's something you can do in advance.
Yeah.
And just set it out for everybody, and can still have a beautiful presentation too, because you don't have to, but you can take the big kimchi leaves and roll them around pork belly. Doesn't have to be pork belly; it could be pork neck.
Oh.
Really, any part. But you want the fat.
Yeah.
And do you know why you need that fat, Peter?
Why? I love it, but I don't know why.
Well, when you've got sour flavors in anything you're cooking, you know, if you've got sour, there's two main ways to balance off that sourness, okay? Because we love to find these balances, you know, so flavors can ping pong and just ride the edges between sour, sweet,
Is that
spicy.
what we like? Is that what we find like delicious?
That's what I love.
I love it.
Yeah,
as well,
I
but
think
I didn't know why.
the balance allows for subtle flavors to be more apparent. If you're really, really salty or really, really sweet, it overpowers the other possibilities of tasting other things.
Yeah.
So in the case of kimchijjim, you have a beautiful balance between sour kimchi, and now there's two variations. You talked about hundreds of or thousands of types of kimchi, right?
Yeah.
There's shin kimchi and there's mungunji, right? And there's that sour kimchi, and then it's like old sour kimchi.
Proper old.
No, you can make kimchijjim with either one. I prefer the older one, but you don't have to have that one.
Oh, wow. Because Leon was curious. He was saying, what kind of kimchi do you use? You're not using like a very fresh, like kochori or something like that, for sure.
You can't do that. Now, Leon, if you've got access to some good sour kimchi or mugunji, the really old aged one, you know, which I love these flavors. They get, how do you describe it, Peter? You know, fresh kimchi will make your mouth water, and just you get that crunch.
Yeah, and everything's really fresh inside.
Right, there's no crunch in these. Maybe in the sour kimchi you might have a little crunch still, but in the mugunji, no, it's all soft.
Yeah,
the leaves almost go opaque. You know, and there's this depth of flavor. Definitely some umami in there, because remember, you've got ekjot in there. You've got like fish sauce or the little fermented shrimp that are lifting up umami flavors, concentrating those there. But as things ferment, they get more and more sour.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's why you want that fatty pork in there.
If you don't have the fat, it won't balance that out. And then another way to balance it, the other best way to balance off sour is with sweet. And so often brown sugar or white sugar or honey will be added to this.
Yes.
You definitely get some natural sweetness off of onions that always go into this dish. Could be just regular old white or yellow onions, or scallions or leeks, or our daepa here, the Korean leeks.
And they're the basic ingredients that make this up. But for some listeners who maybe aren't eating pork for, you know, certain reasons, there's a big proportion of the population.
Sure.
I gotta say, I feel really bad for you, because it's so good together. Like, there's nothing quite like that.
It is quite good, but you know, the mackerel version is amazing too. Have you had goldengochim?
Yeah, so that one, you don't call it kimchijjim, right? You focus more on the mackerel in that case, right? But that's so good.
It's really lovely. Now, in that case, you might want to add more fat, because again, there's not a bunch of oil in the goldengo. There's quite a bit of oil for a fish, but nothing compared to the pork. So you're going to have to increase the fat somehow, which you could do that with oil or butter. Toasted sesame oil would be probably a better way
just adding that to that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in some kimchijjims, you will have a lot of pork, but you're not calling it like 돼지고기jjim.
I know, isn't that so funny? You'll go to these restaurants, you order kimchijjim, and then out comes this massive hunk of pork belly. You know, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah.
I didn't expect that. And then, conversely, on the flip side, you go and get the mackerel one, the kodongojjim, and there's a lot of kimchi in some of those. And
Big
you're like,
time.
Okay, that's interesting. They taste, in my opinion, completely different. Like, and I love the kodongo one. It's because kodongo itself, the mackerel tastes different, right, I suppose.
Right, and we've got great fresh mackerel here. Then if you're not into fish, you could even go mushrooms. I've seen mushroom variations. With usually with the shiitake mushrooms.
Okay.
Or tofu. You know, a nice tofu with all that sour kimchi is lovely.
In a gym. Okay, because we do have a lot of kimchi dishes with tofu. What's the one I'm thinking of? It's like fried kimchi, and then you have the little like slabs of tofu and eat them together.
Right,
That's good. But in a gym, I think I'd like that more, because to be honest, with the slabs of tofu, they're often just completely plain, and then you put the kimchi on top. Whereas in the gym, they'll like soak up a lot of the kimchi juices.
In there, because this is a stew in a lot of ways, because you might not use your deep pot for this. You might use a more shallow, wider pot for this. With a lid, of course, because you're going to braise it.
Yeah,
and you can take those big leaves and roll them around pieces of pork or fish
that's
or
clever.
tofu or mushrooms. And so you put these, and they're almost, they look like kind of like dumplings now, wrapped up, and put them all out in the shallow pot. Get some braising liquid in there. Now we're talking about anchovy broth, or the famous Korean dashima yuksu,
Okay.
right? Which can be made from kelp and dried anchovies and garlic and leeks and onion.
You're putting not too much in.
Not covering it,
No.
And then a lot of folks say you got to add some doenjang or some soybean paste to this, a bit more garlic. But all these flavors are in the kimchi as well. So it kind of depends on your own personal preference.
My mum is definitely more about the taste than aesthetics. So she's never bothered to wrap the meat or tofu in the kimchi.
Yeah.
I want to try that now, because I'm assuming then if you took that out and like just bit into it, it would be perfect. It'd be like a wrap.
It's such a lovely thing to plate up. So if you've got a small dinner party or a big dinner party, you could get 15 of these in your average household shallow braising pan, right? And then you can take one out and put it on each plate.
And that's just their individual portion kind of thing.
Garnish with some sesame seeds and maybe some chopped scallions and drizzle a little toasted sesame oil over the top. And
again, my mum's not doing that final step at all. And it's still good. Like, it's still just great. Because we have it just the traditional way. There's the big dukbegi in the middle, right? The stone pot with all the kimchi, all the pork. And we're just all
got your
putting our
scissors.
spoons. And you're cutting the kimchi into smaller bits.
Yeah.
And it's a sharing dish, traditionally. But even in Korea nowadays, more and more people are getting more like hygiene conscious and not doing that so much, right? It's kind of sad, but it does make sense health-wise with COVID especially. And stuff,
right. Yeah, in the famous restaurants, they don't really go for presentation. It's just, the slab of pork belly.
Like a
not
huge
even cut
one,
up,
right?
a huge slab, like used for bosam often. We're talking like a kilo chunk of pork belly and all this sour kimchi around it, and then of course tons of rice, because this one, like one of my favorites, the kanjangkejang, the marinated crab. This is the rice thief, as well.
The papdodok. You really. And I do find this, when there's no pork, it's not quite the same. Like when there's pork and it's fatty, then you are eating more rice than with anything else, for sure. Kimchijjim is the topic of the day. We have Leon and Siska on our FB stream, and apparently Ki, Keon from Arirang News,
yeah.
he took them out to a kimchijjim place near Arirang when they came over and visited.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do let
Good
us
on
know
you, Ki.
what you thought, right? Siska saying the kimchi and pork belly, definitely a yummy combination. Which is why, when you're having samgyeopsal, pork belly on the grill, you'll often have kimchi and maybe grill that as well.
Oh, baby.
And that's so good too, isn't it?
Now,
All about Korea.
Arirang Radio.
We're back for part 3, talking about kimchijjim, the braised kimchi dish, where, as much as the kimchi, maybe the pork or the kodungo or even the tofu are stars of this dish. In terms of presenting it nicely by wrapping it up, that's one way. I've also seen some places where they put like the whole half or quarter head of kimchi just in there.
Yeah.
And it's like still attached to that rooty bit, which I'm pretty sure you can't eat. Can you?
I've eaten them.
Really?
Yeah, sure.
When they've like fermented for long enough, like you were saying, then they're soft enough.
Usually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There might be a little fibrous, but I'm weird. I just want to try everything. So
And that's totally okay for you. It's a good bit of fiber in your digestive system.
There you go.
Yeah, that I think also has another kind of attractive charm to it. It looks just very rustic in there.
Yeah, that's if you've got what do they call them, a polgi?
Yeah.
Right. So there's there's so many different terms and different details when it comes to kimchi, of course, because we just have so many types and stages of it, right? And so again, we're talking about the sour kimchi or the mugunji, the really sour kimchi.
How old are we talking for like
6
mugunji?
months
Okay.
for the sour kimchi, the shin kimchi.
Okay.
And then, maybe 1 or 2 years for the mugunji. So
Yeah, you're right. You said earlier, if it's translucent almost, then you can tell it's like a 묵은지.
Well, and what you mentioned about grilling it at the samgyeopsal restaurants, I love that flavor. It changes so much. You know, we're always making hot sauces from the farm and fermenting them, and I've got to keep tasting them over these ferments because they really start to develop and change, and you want to catch them at the right times.
Yeah.
You know, and kimchi's the exact same way.
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of even the sour kimchi when it's not cooked.
Okay.
When it's just as a panchan, a side dish.
Yeah.
I prefer mine. I love kotchori, which is the one which isn't fermented at all, right? Which is just not got any of that good bacteria, but it's still healthy because it's like a cabbage or whatever.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
But maybe a month maximum, maybe 6 weeks after. That's my sweet spot.
I do love the fresher kimchi, you know, like 2 months when it's still bubbling and you get that kind of sparkle tingle.
A bit of fizz in there.
But those are not the ones you want to use for this dish. When you've got that sour kimchi and you're like, oh, what am I going to do with this sour kimchi now? Then it's time to think about kimchijjim or kimchijjim.
Yeah, the jjigae. So to do the jjigae, you're putting just a lot more liquid in there, right?
Yes, and you can make it faster. You're going to cut the pork in smaller pieces. Your cook times is way shorter for a kimchi jjigae. You could have that done in minutes. Whereas a kimchijjim, you really want to give yourself an hour and a half, you know, because you want those big chunks of pork to get really tender and render off that fat that's going to balance off the sourness of the sour kimchi.
And I mean, there is another dish as well, which is why many people do get confused. Just kimchi goop, which is literally just kimchi soup and is a bit thinner, right?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's even just more liquid.
Right.
And just kimchi like floating around in there.
Yeah, it's not been one of my favorites because it lacks the oomph, you know, that you want for
the jjigae, right?
There you go.
And you're like, this isn't quite as, like you say, the oomph in there. It's more watery. I don't mind it. My mum will do that, and she's done this from about 6 months ago. She saw it on some cooking show. Just put a lump of butter in the kimchi guk. It's amazing.
I know.
And that must be the sourness kind of fat.
There
kind
you
of
go.
thing.
It's balancing off that fat, balances off that sourness.
So good.
Yeah.
For any of our listeners who are tuning in and thinking, oh, this would be great, but I don't have kimchi and I don't want to make it. Or
I got you covered. I really want to. Okay, I've never done this. All right, full disclaimer, I've not tried this yet, but I know it would work. And somebody out there, you guys have got to try this. So if you don't have kimchi, get some sauerkraut.
Oh.
And get like a really sour sauerkraut, you know? So say you buy a store-bought one and it's not really that sour.
Yeah.
Leave it out of the fridge for a day.
Oh, okay.
I'm not kidding. It's not going to kill you. Don't worry. leave it out of the fridge and get one that's a live probiotic sauerkraut.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it's been pasteurized. It may not continue to ferment.
Sure.
But try if you can get red pepper flakes, red pepper paste, doenjang, all these other ingredients.
Yeah.
And you can't find the sour kimchi, I bet you it'll work really well with the sauerkraut. You'll just have to kick up the other ingredients a bit because the sauerkraut doesn't have all those other ingredients that are going to making the kimchi.
So sauerkraut, if I'm thinking of the right thing, it's not like these big leaves or anything.
Diced up normally, yeah.
But so the texture will be different, but the flavor profile.
There you go. There you go. The flavor profile should work, yeah.
And I think in Germany they eat a lot of sauerkraut with their schnitzels, right? Their kind of pork.
There is a recipe that I grew up eating that has German roots. And it's pork chops and sauerkraut, but then it changed. They're still doing the balance between the fat and the sour. Yeah. And we would add some sugar to it and applesauce and whole stewed tomatoes.
Wow.
And I've tried to find the name of this dish. It's so rustic, old school German. I don't think there's really a name other than just like pork and kraut.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's very, very similar to a kimchijjim or even a jjigae because the sour, the fat, the sweet.
It's all there, isn't it? And when you're preparing this dish with the pork, is there any need to put in some alcohol into here?
Oh, that's a good point. So here in Korea, often folks really want to avoid any kind of meat smell.
We don't like that 고기 냄새, like 돼지 냄새 or 양 냄새 from the pork or lamb in particular.
I have noticed, we're so lucky here with all this domestic, fresh, local products, and I have noticed that in the summertime, well, I don't want to gross anybody out here, But if you think about it,
Yeah.
The animals are under a bit more stress in the summer. It's hot.
Sure, they're sweating.
Yeah. And I've noticed the smell of the meat change of the seasons.
Really?
And it doesn't put me off, really. But if you really don't, if you are put off by something like that, what traditionally is done here is get a little soju on it, or rice wine or mirin or something like that, and leave that on there for 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
And that'll help cut that out.
And then you just like wash it off, or you just take it out?
Sure. Well, if you just use a little bit, you don't have to wash it off. You just kind of dampen all the meat with some soju or something.
Okay.
And then you can also put your ginger and your garlic on there, because you're going to throw ginger and garlic into the dish anyway. Okay. So you might as well put it right on the pork.
And that will help take out some more odors.
Absolutely. And, some folks will say you got to cook the pork first and then wrap it up.
Yeah.
A lot of folks don't. I mean, you can make this a super one dish meal. Definitely cooking it first is you'll be able to create more layers of flavor in your dish. Okay. Is that really necessary for kimchijjim? Yeah, some of the best I've ever had. It's really about that good kimchi in there.
Yeah.
And then just the tenderness and quality of the pork. So.
That's the key ingredient. Yeah, we are a bit more sensitive, I feel, here to meat smells, right? And
but it's, I think that's come down a lot because now everybody consumes lamb here. And 8 years ago, that was no way.
Yeah,
no
you
way.
talk about the smell of it putting people off, right? Has it got less smelly? Surely not. It must be perceptions that are changing, right?
And the increased popularity in the gopjang makjang dechang in the younger population of Korea.
All the innards and intestines.
I think people are just, it's just foodie boom here. It really is a domestic foodie boom for the last 7, 8, 9 years. Yeah. And people's horizons are broadening, and we're getting a lot of really cool stuff now.
Yeah, and I would say, we've always been, as a base level, less fussy than like the UK or the US with people with their plain hamburgers and things like this.
That's very true. Good point. Yeah.
And so it means we eat so many different things.
Less fussy than Peter.
Definitely. I must be one of the fussiest people in Korea, and I'm not bad compared to my British friends. The other way that I've had it a couple of times, which could be a good tip if you like ribs, is with pork ribs, right?
Yes. If you really want to show off for some dinner guests, this is one you could do. It's essentially the same exact recipe. You're just using nice, thick, kind of like baby back or loin ribs.
Yeah. That goes well together.
Plenty of fat in there, lots of flavor in the bone that's going to go into your braising liquid, and then that steals the rice.
The ribs, though, here in the supermarket, compared to the UK, are so expensive. Like, you don't get too many, I see. Like, there aren't a great selection, and they're often quite small. I've started to see bigger ones, like more meatier ones, but it's not that easy to get the pork ribs, I feel.
Nah, very true, Peter, very true.
I'm a little sad. And then one last thing, like many of our listeners, when we're talking about meats and stuff, and pork is a big deal in this dish, they're thinking of the sam, like the wraps with the lettuce and things like that. It's not so common to have this dish with that.
No, I've seen it with laver, with kim, and you might wrap a little bit with that. Mainly, you just got to have your rice.
Yeah.
You've got enough kimchi in the main dish. You don't always have to have kimchis with it, but you'll definitely see some other milder panchan or side dishes with it.
Yeah. There's always the panchan, isn't there, for every dish. You've made me incredibly hungry. Siska is siding with me from Indonesia, saying, I prefer the fresh kimchi compared to the old one. It is just too sour for me. Well, take Ryan's tip of having it with something. And she did say the kimchijjim that Key took them to was delicious.
Oh, I bet.
Absolutely delicious. And a bowl of rice, and that is a hearty lunch or a dinner. Oh, I need to eat this soon. Ryan, thank you so much. Take care. Happy New Year once again.
Absolutely. You too, Peter.
You've been listening to the Thursday segment, Dish of the Day with Chef Ryan on #DailyK.